All right, Steve Wood, recovered alcoholic. Welcome to the Great Rowley Book Study. And so last week, um, we covered a lot of history. We'll cover a little bit more tonight because we're in the forwards. But we looked at the table of contents last week. We looked at each step within the table of contents, where they lie and stuff like that. But what stood out was the first two steps cover 52 pages. And it's pretty obviously that Bill wants us to go on this investigation. And that investigation, begins in doctor's opinion, goes all the way to page 60. An investigation to know why we're powerless and to know why we need power. And that investigation, of course, leads to the decision to take action. And from there, we get results. So investigation, decision, action, results. And we looked at the preface and talked about the textbook. Now it's a detailed study guide with instructions so we can learn facts, and it transfers information from one person to the next. And our book is no different. And just like all textbooks, it's not open to interpretation. And you hear that in the fellowship quite often. Uh, Tonight, we're going to continue our journey through the Roman numerals of the big book. It's actually called a prologue, if you want to be specific in a book. And the prologue would be, you know, preface, forwards, and stuff that we don't have in the big book also. Usually, and so tonight what we're looking at forward to the first edition where we're at. And just put this out there. So a forward is a piece of, it's a writing at the front of a book that serves pretty much to introduce the reader to the book. Sometimes it's written by another person. It's a very popular day to do it. Bill wrote this forward. He wrote the rest of the book. But a forward explains why you should be interested in this book. It's a selling point, and it gives some insight about the book. It kind of gives, look at it as a forward gives a book credibility, is a good way to put it. So forward to the first edition. This is the forward as it appeared in the first printing of the first edition in 1939. And that's the first 100, always. We have Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Now, you probably guessed the one change. It originally said 100 men who have recovered, and they changed that. But hopeless means no possibility for success, without hope. It's a it's a it's a dark place to be and a beautiful place to be. We didn't know it was a beautiful place to be at the time, but beyond hope. And the premise here is we have recovered, been restored to health from this hopeless state of mind, and from this hopeless state of mind called the obsession, and a hopeless state of mind called the physical allergy, craving. So the obsession is what brings me to the drink. The allergy is what keeps me in the drink, craving for more. Um, my experience is I've recovered from that seamless hopeless state of mind and body. And an interesting, so here's a way to look at it's very interesting way to look at hopelessness. So some of you may have heard of anaphylactic shock. Some people get it from a bee sting, but anaphylactic shock is a shock that's so deep that a person can appear dead. The pupils don't change, because of light. Breathing doesn't seem like it's happening. Heartbeat is so low you can barely get a pulse. Today, because of modern medicine, when a person has anaphylactic shock, you know, they know the state you're in. They know right away because they have machines and stuff, right? But in the 1800s, there was these stories of people coming back from the dead. And what it was is people would, the mortician would be in the morgue, and all of a sudden the drawer would open up and some guy would get out who they thought was dead, just woke up. That'd probably scare the crap out of the poor guy. But if you're the mortician, that actually, where the whole premise of living dead came, zombies and all that. But the premise of it here is they had anaphylactic shock. Now, let's look at anaphylactic shock in a different way. Let's say we all got an anaphylactic shock in here. We all got a bee sting, let's just say. And we're in the 1800s. So I'll get anaphylactic shock, and this doctor comes in the room and he goes, they're all dead. He looks at her eyes. There's the way they used to look at it then with light and stuff. They don't see any breathing, don't put the air to the chest, don't hear a heartbeat. So they call, these guys are all dead. Let's send them to the mortician. Mortician looks at them again, calls in the undertaker, starts building the pine boxes, and the grave digger starts digging the graves in the ground. So what happens is, since we're all dead in those people's eyes, they put us in a pine box, nail it shut, and they put us about 8 feet down on the ground and bury us. Now, think of this for a second. When you woke up in the ground, in a dark box, not knowing what's going on, no one can hear you cry for help or hear you scream. It's the best example I could think of a hopeless condition. What would it take you to get out of the situation? A miracle would have to happen, some type of miracle. What else? But you would be praying your ass off. You're not going to wonder what God looks like, or who your higher power is, or if God's male or female. You're going to be praying for a miracle. Hypothetically, we're all in a pine box. We're in a hopeless state, hopeless condition of mind and body that we can't get out of on our own power. It might be the only thing in your life you could never beat on your own power. And we prayed, tried numerous ways to beat it, hoping for miracles. And the 10-step, promises says the problem, the obsession has been removed. That's what recovered is. That right there is a miracle. Our book is filled with miracles, or as a book calls it, a miracle of healing. And that the steps, so they're saying the steps we know the steps perform miracles, and he gets us out of that condition, out of the pine box, so to speak, and back to normal life. And that's the miracle of it. That's the miracle of healing. We don't think of that. So back to the book. To show others precisely how we recovered is the main purpose of this book. This is a very important sentence. It took me years to really understand this in a certain way. So when your big book, the first time it's handed to you, maybe it was at a rehab, maybe it was at your first meeting, you put your name in it. Maybe you put your sobriety date in it. Maybe you put your phone number in it. But is it really your book? Is it your book? Oh, yes, yeah, it's my book. But see, when you do the steps, you don't need to fully understand the steps or even comprehend them. You just do them. You have a sponsor to guide you through the book. You won't fully understand the steps until you take another through it. It's impossible to fully understand them. The more you take through it, the more understanding, the more you know them. So the main purpose of this book is to show another how to recover. In hindsight, your big book is going to be more valuable to the people you take through it. You never read your book as much as you read it with other people, the people you're taking through it. So my big book was never really mine. It's for the people I've taken through it. It says back to the book, for them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. I mean, we don't have to argue this book is flawless and, virtually flawless. I mean, pretty much. It's all I'd say it's perfect. But we don't have to sell this book. Just let the book sell, let the book do the talking. So let's let the book do the talking here. It says, we think that this account of our experiences will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic. Notice what he says there. He says everyone. Everyone. That doesn't leave anyone out. Will help everyone. He deemed this for anyone that could help. It says, many do not comprehend the alcoholic is a very sick person. Back then, no one, no one did. I'm not saying AA members, I'm saying society in general. No one did. I mean, they put them in mental institutions. They looked at them as the worst people in the world, criminals, it was horrible. And very few today look at the alcoholic as a sick person. We're just getting to understand alcoholism, just starting to happen, just starting to get around to it. And they're just starting to look rehabs. They're starting to look at the big book as maybe the most important thing offered there. Even churches are doing that. And he says, and besides, we are sure that our way of living has its advantages after all. It is important to remain anonymous because we are too few at present to handle the overwhelming number of personal appeals which may result from this publication. Being mostly business and professional folk, we could not well carry our own occupations at such an event. This is very important right here. We would like it understood that our alcoholic work is an avocation. So what's an avocation? Avocation is something you do for pleasure and not pay, right? Something you do outside of work, right? Such as taking another through the steps or just helping people. I'm going to stick to taking people to the steps, but something you do that enriches your life and makes other people's lives better as well. And it should never feel like work. If your step work does feel like work, or you're stressed, that's why, because you're putting stress in there. How do we get stress from sponsoring with people? We get too wrapped up in the person, we're working with, trying to take them to the steps. And we stress why they're not doing the steps. How come this guy, I took him all the way to step 4 and now he doesn't call me? Or why would the person make an amends? Or they won't sponsor. And rather than staying locked up in that self-centered fear, because we are there for everybody. When that happens, we do inventory. If we stay in that stress, and you continue in that fear, you won't like sponsoring, you'll quit. Right? Because it feels like work. Again, when it feels like that, do inventory. Write down the fear, discuss another, let God remove it. Same formulas we're doing 429 step 10. And that's what we have to look at. It says, when writing or speaking publicly about alcoholism, we urge each fellowship member to omit his personal name, designating himself instead as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Very earnestly, we ask the press also to observe this request, for otherwise we shall be greatly handicapped. This sounds like tradition number 11. And so tradition number 11 is our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We always need to maintain perfect anonymity at the level of press, radio, and film. I'm going to read the long form of that. So this is very important to understand the long forms of the traditions. Our relations with general public should be characterized by personal anonymity. We think AA ought to avoid sensational advertising. Our names and pictures as AA members ought not be broadcast, filmed, or publicly printed. Our public relations should be guided, and this is important right here, by the principle of attraction rather than promotion. There is never need to praise ourselves. We feel it better to let our friends recommend us. Wow. I mean, the last 2 sentences in that long form were guided by attraction rather than promotion. Right? There's never a need to praise ourselves. I'm good at these steps. Oh, can I sponsor you? No, you let them come to you and ask you. Your friends will recommend you. That's the best way to do it, because if you go up to a bunch of people and say, can I sponsor you all the time? You're going to get people who don't want to do it. Attraction rather than promotion. They're telling us right there too. It says, we are not an organization in the conventional sense of the word. Now it sounds like tradition number 8. You see where the traditions came from? They didn't come out to the 50s. This is in the forward of the first edition. So we're not an organized in the conventional sense of the words. Attrition number 8 is Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. Let's go to the long form again. Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional. We define professionalism as the occupation of counseling alcoholics for fees or hire. Very important there. But we may employ alcoholics where they are going to perform those services for which we might otherwise have engaged non-alcoholics. Such special services may be recompensed, but our usual AA 12-step work is never to be paid for. So this is extremely important here. A lot of people, I think it's happened to a lot of people. It happened to me. I was going to school for counseling. I was loving it. I had an internship. I didn't love the places I was internshipping for because they didn't necessarily promote, rehabs are. They're not, steps are kind of afterthought. But, I was a volunteer staff at a rehab, and I was already doing a book study there. I was already sponsoring there. Loved it. And then one of my close friends, an amazing book thumper, took over that program as program director. And what he wanted at the rehab was he wanted the counselors to be book thumpers. And so he did that. And then he switched to what was called Recovery Dynamics. Recovery Dynamics, you're not familiar with Joe McQueen from Joe and Charlie wrote it. And it's basically big book, each week a different step for 12 weeks in rehab. And it's awesome. And so he wanted us as counselors, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. I get to do this and get paid for. I'm going to school for counseling, and this guy wants to, he's paying for me to get certified in this. I did all that. So this is reteaching the steps. It's like doing a book study, and I thought this would be amazing and perfect. But when I started volunteering in that position, it wasn't the same once I got paid for it. I had to be at work on time. I had to stand by their standards. I had to do other stuff. The book studies were critiqued. I had to watch what I say. It wasn't fun and rewarding anymore. But also, most of all, was echoing in my heart was I was being paid for something that I was going to do. I didn't feel like I was giving back. I realized I can't do 12-step work and get paid for it ever. I'm talking big book work, especially since this program is built around freely giving yourself to other alcoholics. So I went to my close friend and I said, give me back the volunteer position. He goes, you crazy? I'll pay you $10 more an hour. And I said, no. I realized within the realm of the spirit of professionalism, I cannot be paid for it. There's no spirit in there. And I mean, I stayed a counselor for quite a while and did that, treatment center stuff, but never again. I would bring up the big book when needed. I would talk the big book when needed, those places, but I never done a big book study or got paid for, just that one time. And I thought it'd be perfect. It says there are no fees or dues whatsoever. Your requirement is for membership desire to stop drinking. So now it's tradition number 3. No requirement for membership desire to stop drinking. Now listen to the long form of that. This is tradition number 3, long form. Our membership ought to include all those who suffer from alcoholism. Hence, we may refuse none who wish to recover, nor ought AA membership ever to depend upon money or conformity. I love this. Any 2 or 3 alcoholics gathered together for sobriety may call themselves an A group, provided that as a group they have no other affiliation. The one thing about tradition 3, the only desire, there was a controversy about that because the Oxford group members in New York were big into the Oxford group. It wasn't necessarily a tradition they had, but it's pretty much to be a member, you just had to believe in God. To become a member, to eventually get yourself in the door to take all their steps to be a member. And Jim Burwell, who helped Bill with this book very closely, was off, a fast thinker. And he looked at those guys and he said, no, all you desire to stop drinking, off the top of his head. And that right there, is one of the most beautiful lines that we've ever had. It's back to the book. We're not affiliated with, this part's very important too. We're not allied with any particular faith, sect, or denomination, nor we oppose anyone. We simply wish to be helpful to those who are afflicted. So allied with, me, of course, means associated. What he's trying what this influenced him with this, we're not affiliated with any particular faith, was because a lot of people, when they were inviting him to the new, AA, wasn't AA yet, but originally they were the drunk squad, even before Bill was around, as a branch of Oxford group. A lot of the drunks would hear Oxford, I don't want to go there. And they had the drunk squad going for quite a while, even after the future AA was formed. And they got kind of kicked out of the Oxford group, went to Calvary Missions, and they started with the future AA. And a lot of people wouldn't, that they wanted to bring in there from the rehabs and stuff, because they would think they're Oxford group, and that they're trying to say we're not, they didn't want to say we're not affiliated with the Oxford group, but not only that, but any faith, sect, or denomination, you know. That sounds like, part from our preamble. We hear that in our preamble. And a lot of that preamble is taken from this one too, but I'm going to read the A preamble part of it. The only requirement for membership is desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for a membership. We're self-supporting to our contributions. We're not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither do we endorse nor we oppose any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help others to achieve sobriety. That's from the A preamble. And the part that stands out the most in there for me is, of course, our primary purpose. Our primary purpose is carrying the message to the alcoholic who still suffers, right? Today, the primary purpose of Alcoholics Anonymous and even CA and other groups is to stay sober one day at a time, to get lots of time. More people, you don't hear people brag about, I did their fifth step or this and that too often, or you don't get a chip for that. But people get lots of time when we get paid for, not paid, we get a chip for being away from drink. Carrying this message is so low on the totem pole today, makes me sick to my stomach, and it gets worse. I mean, go to a meeting and, go around the meeting and just ask people, what's the message? Mention the message in this book. I guarantee you'll be shocked that you'll get six people get six different things that have nothing to do with it. People have no clue what the message is anymore. So whose duty is it? It's our duty. That's why we're doing the book studies like this, so we can understand the message. And sometimes the message is as simple as this: I had spiritual awakening, and you can too. As simple as that. It's the 12 steps is the bread and butter of it. See what else the book says. We shall be interested to hear from those who are getting results from this book, particularly those who have commenced work with other alcoholics. So they're talking about, they would go around and ask these people, hey, how's it going with this? We should like to be helpful to such causes. Inquiring by scientific, medical, religious societies will be welcome. Alcoholics Anonymous. So that brings us to the foreword to the second edition. Figures given from the foreword described in the fellowship as it was in 1955. So some of this I explained when I did the history, so I won't go as deep as I did there, but I'm kind of I'll keep it up at the pace, so to speak. So it says, since the original foreword to this book was written in 1939, a wholesale miracle was taking place. I love that. Which means basically a miracle that didn't really cost you anything. Our earliest printing voiced the hope that every alcoholic whose journey will find the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous as his destination. Already continues the early text, 2/3, 3/3, five of us have sprung up in other communities. So, Bill's, his mindset, his goal that AA could be for everybody, right? So he wrote this book. and you want it in black and white. I said this before, these guys had a no-fail attitude, and they knew they're on something special, and they knew Bill was special too. And they knew the main thing they wanted to do, it wasn't about them. It was about changing the way people looked at alcoholism and changing the way the future of alcoholism would be, and it did. Turn it on its ear. I mean, you just go back and when I explained it before, before it existed, when a friend or family member was suffering from chronic drinking, they would drop him off in an asylum and they may never see him again. And they might even call the asylum and say, we don't know who that is. After AA existed, when a family member, or a sick friend, went to court or something, they would be told they can go home with them as long as there are people doing the steps and stuff like that. Talking about the A members. And, they knew it worked. People knew it worked. Society knew it worked. It grew fast, but I don't even think these early A members had a clue or were prepared for how big it could get. Let's see what this says. 16 years have elapsed between our first printing of this book and the presentation in 1955, our second edition. In that brief space, Alcoholics Anonymous has mushroomed to nearly 6,000 groups whose membership is far above 150,000 recovered alcoholics. So let's talk about growth. I'm going to share the screen here to you guys. We're going to look at growth here. So I always love facts and just the facts. So 1935, you had 2 members of Alcoholics Anonymous. And you had 0 groups. I guess you could call them a group, according to what they said. And 5 years later, 1940, you had 1,400 members and 50 groups. In 1945, you had almost 13,000 members and 556 groups. 1950, you had 96,000 groups. Could you imagine being a member from just 10 years prior, or 8, or whenever the Big Book was, 38, when the Big Book was coming, was 50 members, and all of a sudden there's 100,000 members? That's insane. 1955, 156,000 members. That's crazy. 6,200 groups. Now, again, just imagine one of the first 40 members. The miracles taking place, guys coming out of caves and being reborn again. They get to witness that. Now look at this, 1960, 162,000, over 8,000, almost 8,700 groups. 1970, 300,000, 311,450, 16,000 groups. Now, what happened next is called the recovery boom. In the 60s, they opened rehab for the first time, and I'll get to that later. All that changed. They all also for good and bad reasons. But a recovery boom happened. You also had court slips. You also had DUIs happening. And so from 1970 to 1980, we got 600,000 more members. 600,000. 4,200 groups. 1990, you have over 1 million there, 1.9 million groups. I mean, members, and 93,000 groups. In 2000, 2.1 million, 100,000 groups. 2010, 2.2 million. And then, give or take 2000, I've heard it be 26. I don't think it likes to admit anymore how many are in AA because of recovery rates being low, but we'll get into that probably next week, and that's always fun. But 25, it's never really, they've never changed over 25, 2.5 million for a while, 135,000 groups. And, it's interesting. I mean, in the 2020s, there's that many members, and there are more than 135 groups, A groups around the world. A's literature is translated over to 100 languages, over 100 languages. And the big book is, I mean, yeah, that's crazy. Back to the book says groups are found in each of the United States, all of province of Canada. No, those guys. AA has flourished communities in British Isles, Scandinavia countries, South Africa, South America, Mexico, Alaska, Australia, and Hawaii. Hey, we've seen some that sounds like Big Book Compendium. All today, promising beginnings have been made in some 50 foreign countries, and U.S. possessions. Some are now taking shape in Asia. Many of our friends encourage us by saying that this is but a beginning and only an arguably a much larger future ahead. I'm going to close this thing down. So here's the interesting thing here. We're talking 1955. Our country, it was very segregated. And we're going to get that in a few weeks about segregation and Alcoholics Anonymous and who broke that. We'll get that soon. Very soon. But it also wasn't, you're also 10 years out of World War II. You weren't supposed to, if you were anyone that we were at war with, you had a lot of German people changing their names in the United States. But we may have been the only thing at that time where things were happening around the world. So it was a trailblazing. There's a lot of trailblazing going on here. It's pretty deep. Let's look at this. The Spark. I used to go to a book study. My favorite name for ever a book study was just called The Spark. I love that name. That was just called for my friend's book study, The Spark. The spark that was to flare into the first A group was struck at Akron, Ohio in June 1935 during a talk between a New York stockbroker, that's William Griffith Wilson, Bill Wilson, and an Akron physician, that's Robert Holbrook Smith, Dr. Bob. 6 months earlier, the broker had been relieved of his drink obsession. Oh, I thought they didn't mention the word obsession in the big book. But there it is. Had been relieved of his drink obsession by a sudden spiritual experience following a meeting with an alcoholic friend and who had been a contact with the Oxford group of that day. He had been so greatly helped by the late Dr. William D. Duncan Silkworth, a New York specialist who we're going to do a whole 2 weeks or 3 weeks on him pretty soon, a New York specialist in alcoholism, who is now kind of no less than a medical saint. Also, Bill considered him a founder by AA members. And those whose story early of our society appears in the next few chapters, From this doctor, the broker had learned the grave nature of alcoholism, the allergy obsession. Now, the obsession aspect, maybe not that word, was people were familiar with that. They just said the guy must be nuts. It's a mental thing. Let's put a mental institution. Let's scramble their brains. Don't drink again. But no one wanted to believe about this physical factor. We'll get into that, how Silkworth changed the world. Though he could not accept all tenets of the Oxford group, just like 30, altogether. Overall, maybe hundreds, but he was convinced the need for moral inventory, confession, a personality defect, restitution to those harmed, helpfulness to others, and a necessity for belief and dependence on God. So basically, what Bill was offering people was inventory. Well, he did it with God first, the Oxford Group way, but So free from dependence upon God, and inventory, confession, restitution, helping others, prayer, meditation. And so it's only 5. And let's see what the book says. Prior to his journey to Akron, the broker had worked hard with many alcoholics on the theory that only alcoholic could help an alcoholic. That's more than a theory, it's fact. But he was only successful keeping himself sober with 6 members. He failed with them all. I'm saying failed. No one fails an alcoholic. Don't ever think you failed an alcoholic. The worst thing you could think is you failed an alcoholic. That it's a person's just not ready yet. You have to be pretty badly mangled before you do this, it says. So what happened is he was only successful keeping himself sober. He thought he failed with all these people. But Lois pointed out, you didn't fail, you're sober. How could you be a failure? So he asked Silkworth why he wasn't keeping others sober. And Silkworth told him, what are you saying? He says, I'm bringing God. He says, give him the hardcore medical facts first, allergy obsession. Boom, first step of recovery is born. Powers over alcohol. So remember when we covered this before, Bill telling, Lois, he can't keep himself sober. She said, go talk to Silkworth. That's what I'm talking about. And when Silkworth told him that, the first person he talked to would bring it to would be, Dr. Bob. He goes, you're telling them to turn their life over to God. He goes, given the hardcore medical facts, given the allergy obsession, they didn't know why they're alcoholic. That's how. I mean, think about that. What would your step work be like if they just said you're just a drunk? Would you even look at step 2? Would you even want step 2? Would you turn your will and life over to the care of God, or back over to yourself so you can quit drinking? Because our prayer before that was, whatever God might be, wherever he is, please take away this bottle from out of my hand. That didn't work. But Bill added powerless over alcohol, and 6 steps are born. Powerless, inventory, confession, restitution, helping others, prayer, meditation. Powerless, inventory, confession, restitution, prayer, meditation. Bill kind of remolded it a little bit than the Oxford group had, because he had an inventory and there wasn't a part of that. So the first person he talked to was, like I said, Dr. Bob. Let's go back to the book here. The broker had gone to Akron on a business venture, which had collapsed. It just didn't go anywhere. Really didn't go anywhere. I think he even had the wrong date, leaving him greatly in fear that he might start drinking again. So he's in that Mayflower Hotel. He's all scared. He hears the crowd in the bar. He hears the laughter. And what really got him was, he says he didn't really want to drink. He really wanted just to go in the bar and feel his social instinct wanted to be fulfilled. He wanted the social part of it, but it scared him because he knows what happened when he wanted that social part. And it's probably the obsession talking to him. He suddenly realized in order to save himself, he must carry the message to another alcoholic. The alcoholic turned out to be the Akron physician, Dr. Bob. So Bill, he's in that Mayflower Hotel, and he looks at the phone directory. He picks his Reverend Tunks out of the registry because his name looked crazy. He thought it was a strange name. That guy, Tunks, steered him towards Oxford group member Norman Shepherd. But Norman Shepherd didn't really deal with alcoholics, but he goes, I know someone who deals with alcoholics, and it's Henrietta Sieberling. And Henrietta had a close friend that she had tried to get sober. I think trying was be like, you got to quit. Can't come around here no more. And that was Dr. Bob. And Dr. Bob, when she went to Dr. Bob, she says, got to come to my house. I want you to meet someone. He wasn't going to go, and Ann's all, you're going over there. He goes over to Henrietta's house, and he goes, tell him he's got 5 minutes. He had no idea what he was getting into, because that turned into a 5-hour conversation. See what the book says. This physician repeatedly tried spiritual means to resolve his alcoholic dilemma, but it failed. Well, he tried spiritual means. He tried the Oxford group, but he never did the Oxford group principles. He had done some of them. Here's the thing. I'm going to backflip a little bit on this. If you do the steps and you decide not to sponsor, are you doing the steps? No. If you decide not to make your amends, are you doing the steps? No. I don't care what step you're on. If you skip if you mess with the recipe, you're not going to get the results you want, and you're going to be in fear. So what happened to Dr. Bob, the same thing. His refusal to make amends. He thought he was this great Oxford Group member, but no, I'm not going to make amends. He's not going to get the results. It's why he failed. His refusal to make restitution, one of their tenets. He's a secret drinker. He feared, if he makes his amends, it's all in his head, right? We plan out every single piece of an amends before we make it, right? What if the person signs the drawing? What if they say this? What if they say that? Right? His thing was, what if I lose my practice? What if they, spread shame upon me? That erroneous thinking kept him drinking and almost dying. And it still happens today. But when the broker gave him Dr. Silver's description of the alcoholism, allergy obsession, in its hopelessness, that pine box, the vision began to pursue it, the spiritual remedy for his malady, with a wellness he had never before been able to muster, because he amends. So let's see, what did he tell him different? Let's go to page 80 from Dr. Bow's Nightmare, page 80. And let's see what, this is great to hear Dr. Bob describe it. It's where it says the question which might naturally come into mind would be, what did the man do or say that was different from what others had said before? Or he's a doctor. Look what he says. It must be remembered that I had read a great deal of books, I read a great deal and talked to everyone who knew or thought they knew about subject alcoholism, because most people probably tell them about alcoholism aren't alcoholics. We got to take all those courses. And if you want to stay up in the medical field on top of things, you have to keep going to these conventions and stuff. So he thought he knew everything about alcoholism until he talked to this guy. But this was a man who had experienced many years of frightful drinking. So this sounds like the first drunk he's ever talked to, who had most of all drunkards' experiences known to man, but had been cured by the very means I've been trying to employ. That is to say, the spiritual approach. He wanted a spiritual approach, but he didn't want to do the amends. He gave me information about the subject of alcoholism, was undoubtedly helpful. So Silver's description of that allergy and the hopelessness of the allergy obsession. Now think of this for a second. If you would have gone to him and never talked to Silkworth before he left, it would have been in that the conversation would last 5 minutes. We wouldn't be sitting here. It's crazy thinking that. To look at this is italic writing in a story. Of far more importance was the fact that he was the first living human. Repeat that, the first living human with whom I'd ever talked to, who knew what he was talking about in regards to alcoholism from actual experience. He had never talked to anyone before. He'd never seen someone before that was recovered. Bill was like the Walking Dead to him. He's like, what? And he knew this guy wasn't bullcrapping his way through it. He wasn't faking until he made it or pretending he was a rock. He was it. And he's sitting right in front of him. He says, in other words, he's talked my language. He knew all the answers, and he certainly not because he picked them up in his reading, actual experience. So when he broke down the allergy, it blew his mind. That was May 12th, 1935. You can't I'm not going to reread the whole story I told before, but I'll tell a variation of it. So Bill lived with Bob and Ann for several weeks trying to work with Bob. And Bob was a tough enough to crack, especially with the amends. They argued about it a lot. and they try to get sober up a couple Oxford group members, but then Bob would, sneak a drink here and there. And he got a couple weeks sober at one point, but then he decided on June 2nd to go on the American Medical Association convention in Atlantic City on a train, which they drank on trains. Some people just went on trains to drink, rolling bar. He drank as soon as he got on the train. He was in a blackout all the way to Atlantic City, all the way through the whole week. And he comes home June 7th and detoxes for 3 days. Only reason he got out of bed was because he had to do a surgery. And Bill gave him a beer and a shot to steady his nerves for surgery. And he used to get home around 7 p.m. after surgery, or a phone call would come in, always out of surgery. Hey, I made it through. I don't know what time I'm going to be home. No phone call. 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock rolls around. And Bill and Ann are like, he's drinking, Ann wanted to go find him. And Bill's like, what are you going to do? And all of a sudden Bob walks in, stone cold sober. Well, he was doing the one thing that made him fail at the Oxford group for years. He was making his amends that night. He made it to his work associates, all of them. He over an hour in the hospital making amends to those work associates, the family, the friends, door to door. He didn't text them or email. Well, they have it then. He didn't text them or email them or call them on the phone, face to face, cold calling, knocking on the door, making amends. That's what I did. And of course, he went to his patients' houses, the ones he feared would help him lose his practice. He went even to the Oxford group and made group amends and one-on-ones with the Oxford group. I didn't mention before, forgot, and I found it very interesting. When he made amends to the Oxford group, one of the things he felt really bad about, being a secret drinker, was one of them, but also his main motivation for going to the Oxford group wasn't doing the Oxford group tenants. He thought I might be able to find more clients. He's a doctor. That's not going to get you what you want there, And he felt bad about that because he knew he said one of his stories already, he said about 3 Oxford group meetings in, he felt, I don't think I'm doing the right thing here, but he kept going. He felt bad. And then he heard the restitution part. But he went to any lengths that night and made amends. He didn't care about his medical reputation being on the line or losing his practice. He just wanted to be sober more than anything in the world. He didn't care what people thought. He didn't care what anyone thought. And he knew something was special about Bill. And it was perhaps might be his only chance, his last chance to stay sober. After these amends, he never drank again. His last drink before the surgery was a shot in the beer. June 10th, 1935 is known as the founding date of Alcoholics Anonymous. Back to the forward. He sobered up, never to drink again, up to the moment of his death in 1950. This seemed to prove that one alcoholic could affect another alcoholic as no non-alcoholic could. Underline that sentence. This proved that one alcoholic could affect another alcoholic as no non-alcoholic could. Drinker to drinker, allergy to allergy. He's talking about there. It also indicates that strenuous work, one alcoholic helping another, was vital to permanent recovery. What do they do when you go to the hospital and your heart's beating fast and you think you're having a heart attack? They take your vitals to see if you're alive. He's saying it's vital to permanent recovery. It's vital that we sponsor in these rooms. It's vital we take people to the steps. In 15 years sober, Dr. Bob worked with over 5,000 alcoholics. I would say that's strenuous work. And he loved it. Yeah, so he loved it. He snuck people with Sister Ignacia. They would sneak people into the hospital with fake elements, stomach ailments, and but whatever he could make up, because the hospitals wouldn't let him in. Just amazing, amazing. The work that him and Sister Ignacia did at the hospital is amazing. Hence, the two men set out almost frantically upon alcoholics arriving to the ward of the Akron City Hospital. Think about how many people came to that ward. Their very first case, a desperate one, recovered immediately and became A number 3. He never drank. He never had another drink. So we're going to stop there. So next week, we're going to scoot up to A Vision for You, and we're going to read about A number 3 and A number 4, and probably A number 5. And we're going to look at, by name, the first 40 members, a very close look at the first 40 members, and how, where there was, and I can say failures, because I don't like that word, where they had success with members and where people weren't getting it, and what changed and stuff.